Hey everyone, it's Ron Johnson, and this is the Ron Johnson Show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast Network. On today's show, excited, Myron Medcalf from ESPN. You're going to want to stick around for that interview. Why? Because there's a new top 5 quarterback in the NFL, in the NFC. There's also a tweet, Shannon Sharpe, right? Kirk Cousins, Kyler Murray. Myron Medcalf is going to weigh in on who would he take coming up this week, if he would rather have Kyler Murray in purple or Kirk Cousins in purple with the diamond chains. And of course, we have to talk about it. The Packers lost. The Packers are 3-4 and the Vikings are 5-1. The Lions might finish second in the division. I actually said that early on. I didn't think it would be the Packers this far down though. But that's all coming up next on the Ron Johnson Show.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. Now the Ron Johnson Show. On the field, in the broadcast booth, Ron Johnson is Minnesota sports. He's played with them, hung out with them, and grown up with all the big names in Minnesota sports. They're hanging out with Ron Johnson. It's the Ron Johnson Show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. And it starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Ron Johnson Show. I'm excited. Bye week. I got to rest. Finally, I got a Saturday kind of to relax during the day, then had some night football. Wasn't great. But then I got to relax on a Sunday, just woke up and did Vikings Game Day Live with Jim Rich. And then I got to chill. I've never been able to chill on a Sunday in a while. Got to sit around, clean the house up a little bit, watch some other football. Speaking of other football, the Packers. The Packers lost. I literally would have put money on. I'm glad I didn't make it to Iowa to put money on this game because I was going to put money on the Packers. I'm like, there's no way the Packers lose to the Commanders, right? There's no way. Taylor Heineke? Not Taylor Heineke. Taylor Heineke did something that not a lot of people thought he could do. We'll talk about that. But before we do, remember, you can now find the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. You can find it on the Roku. If you have a Roku TV, just go to the Roku. Over to the left, it says Add Apps. Click Add, search Locked On Sports Minnesota. Pops up, download it right there. Little square. It'll be right there every time you go to your Roku. Boom, click it. You can watch our shows. You can watch all the interviews. You can watch the Daily 3, whatever you like. You got Superior Sports Talk. You got the football party. Luke Braun is going to put on a foil helmet, maybe. And then, of course, you guys get to see what Luke Inman looks like because he's the most interesting man on that podcast, I've heard. But make sure you get it and you can watch all your favorite shows. Well, on today's show, as I bring in Extra, my producer, Sam, it was an interesting weekend. And, you know, when I'm looking through the Twitter machine right now, as I scroll through the Twitter machine, a lot of people aren't happy, Sam. A lot of these Packer fans are not happy, especially the local Packer fans. They live in Minnesota. They work for maybe networks that we all know, and they are not happy with what's going on. Like, they do not understand is this the end of Aaron Rodgers? Is it time for Jordan Love to take over? Is it time to move on? Is it time? Like, I love what Myron Medcalf said about Aaron Rodgers and the problem he has. You have to stay tuned for that interview. Because he kind of gave me a heads up. We were texting back and forth all weekend, and he said something interesting that I want him to bring up. He's going to bring it up about Aaron Rodgers and relationships. And I'm like, you know what? You might be right. You might be right there. But Aaron Rodgers loses. And so when you go to the NFC North standings and you look at where the Vikings are and you look at where the Packers are, 5-1, they got to rest. You look at the NFC as a whole. Eagles are 1. Vikings are 2. Seahawks are 3. Buccaneers at 3-4. Now, this is because of how stupid the NFL is. The Buccaneers are there. And then you got the Giants because they're behind the Eagles, they would be down, which is still dumb. I don't understand how they do it that way, but whatever. 6-1, somehow the Buccaneers still have the lead on them because their division has now become the NFC East. Like, the NFC East at one point was a dumpster fire. Now the NFC South is the new dumpster fire when you look at the Buccaneers at 3-4, leading the division, tied with the Falcons at 3-4, with the 2-5 Panthers who got rid of their best player, and then the 2-5 Saints that Andy Dalton is now the best meme in the world because a flying cardinal went behind him. And it was one of those, like, when all is going wrong, this is what your life looks like. Every parent's been there where they kind of turn their head and walk out the room as their kids are throwing crap across the room and throwing each other. But Sam, Washington Commanders find a way to knock the Packers down a peg. The Vikings now 2-1 on the road, 3-0 at home. So they get the Cardinals coming to them at home. The Packers 2-2, and then 1-2 on the road, 2-2 at home. The Bears are 2-4. So they've only played 6 games. So technically they've lost the same amount of games as the Packers. So if the Bears win the next game or two, they might be ahead of the Packers because the Packers have a tough one coming up as well. So when you look at it, I think they play the Bills. So they're probably going to go 3-5. Bears win, they go 3-4. So in your mind, what's going on with the NFC North right now?
So here's how I'm thinking about it. If the
and
Vikings,
by the way, the Bears play the Patriots. So the Patriots are beatable of the Bears.
Correct. So the Packers, if the Vikings go 5-6 the rest of the way, that's a very conservative estimate. That puts them at 10 wins. The Packers would have to go 7-3 and beat the Vikings, or go 8-2 if they lose to the Vikings. Like, that is a huge hill to climb, and Aaron Rodgers has done it before. He can rattle off wins, but look at their schedule. Bills,
looking at it.
Really tough one coming up. They got the Rams, because that's that first place matchup in the NFC. They got to play the Rams. They got to play the Titans. The Dolphins, probably with Tua. They'll face the Dolphins in a much tougher spot than when the Vikings had to face them with a backup. And the Cowboys. And the Vikings have a couple of those games remaining as well.
And the Eagles.
And they have the New York teams. But
they have the Eagles,
Packers
too.
might have to go 8-2. The Eagles, yes, thank you. They have to go 8-2 potentially just to beat the Vikings out if the Vikings go 5-6. And I think the Vikings can go 5-6. So it's a tough path for the Packers going forward. Now, the wild card is right there for them, Ron. You mentioned it. There are a lot of bad teams in the NFC. Like the Rams right now are the 7th seed at 3-3. So the Packers still have a lot to play for. Yeah. But the division, the Vikings are in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's where, like, Myron Mitchell again. I mean, Myron Metcalf. You'll hear it later. He talks about that. Like, which Vikings team is this going to be? With the real Vikings, please stand up. Like, is this going to be a team that just wins ugly all year? Like, we're not super excited about it, but they're 5-1, and then all of a sudden they go 6-1, and then they go 7-1 and beat the Commanders. Like, at what point do we say, like, whoa, okay, we'll take 7-1, ugly, and then you got the Bills and you got the Cowboys. But when you think about that, and I mean, now let's say they lose to the Bills. Let's say they beat those two, they're 7-1. They lose to the Bills, they're 7-2. They beat the Cowboys at home. Like, going into Thanksgiving, they're 8-2. Like, 8-2 heading into Thanksgiving. Like, that is crazy to think about. But let's remember, the Vikings have gone 5-1 before and lost and end up going 5-4, end up going 8-8 because they beat the Bears. They were 7-8. So they end up going 7-8 into that last game. 7-8. They went from 5-1 to 7-8. 5-1. They started off 5-1, and then they went 2-7. 2-7 in their last 9 games. That's bad. And so that's where this culture is going to go. What is this culture about? Is this culture a team that's going to do that? Or now is this a team saying, hey, we're playing with house money. We're 5-1. Let's put our foot on the throat of the NFC North. Like, we can really just squeeze the life out of the Packers' hopes to win the division. We can squeeze the life out of it. Like, they can almost knock the Packers out of the playoffs in that last game if the Packers are struggling and some other teams in the NFC find a way to win 9 games. Like, if they can find a way to win 8 or 9 games and the Packers can't, and it comes down to that last game where the Packers are like, if we go 8-9, we're in the playoffs. And the Vikings are like, let's go ahead and knock them off in Green Bay. Let's get them out of here. Yeah. Let's get them out of here. Like, I was hoping the Lions would not be the bottom of the barrel. We all thought the Bears, and now everybody's changing their predictions. Like, I thought the Lions would be 3rd place at worst. And now they are struggling. Like Dan Campbell is not getting it done. But you're right. The NFC North, it's ripe for the taking. It's right there in their grasp. Kirk Cousins and the Diamond Chains can take over. I love the fact that in the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds of, I think, the previous 3 games, Kirk Cousins was the number one quarterback in the NFL for passer rating in the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds, meaning it's not garbage time. This is, we got to go win time. And Kirk Cousins is dead on accurate. He's like Will Smith in Deadshot. You give me a target, I'm going to knock it out the park. Like, I love that. Like, before, if we had to pick a superhero, Kirk Cousins would be, everybody was Captain America and, you know, all these nice. No, he's Deadshot. He's out here with a sniper rifle, knocking people off one by one. I love it. I love Kirk Cousins. I love this team. I love what he's bringing to the table. And remember, Locked On Sports Minnesota gives you endless Vikings talk with local experts. Get your daily 30-minute dose of sports with KARE 11 Sports anchor Reggie Wilson going back and forth with his co-host Luke Inman. It's fast, it's fun, it's superior sports talk. Your daily Minnesota sports show. And Sam, I know you got some good for us from our sponsors.
BetOnline.net, Ron. Number one source for football and the start of the new basketball season. You can bet against the Lakers all day long, and you can bet on the Timberwolves, who are 2-1. Find the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and more. That Vikings line against Arizona, Minnesota favored by 5 early in the week. We'll see which direction that goes as the week goes on. BetOnline.net, your fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events. You've also got MMA, boxing, and golf there as well. Head to their website today or use your mobile device at BetOnline, where the game starts.
And now, as promised in the Hang on Ron Johnson segment, I got ESPN's own Myron Medcalf. Guy from Minneapolis, loves the city, but also loves to talk national news as well. So I'm looking forward to this. I want to thank Myron for joining me on the Ron Johnson Show. As we jump out there, let's start out right away. I got to get this off my heart. I gotta let it go now because it's this is now the Rutgers 0-0 championship season. We are done with Penn State, but we have to cover it as media members. So reluctantly, I want to talk about this. Let's get into it. What do you see going on with this Gophers team? We know Tanner Morgan was hurt, did not dress. Ethan Kaliakmanis got to dress this time. It was the starting QB, but in a whiteout, not a great atmosphere for a freshman quarterback on his first official start. Myron, what do you see for this Penn State Gophers game, and what do you see for the Gophers moving forward?
They got to make a decision about who they want to be. I think this is sort of that juncture of the season. They had all of the hype when they start 4-0. Now you lose 3 in a row, and people feel like you've missed expectations. They're questioning your heart. You got to decide what you want. You know, I think this is a team that, I think the Big Ten is really Ohio State and Michigan at the top. And then I think there's a pretty big gap with that next tier of teams. And I think the Gophers certainly were in that. But now they look like they're sort of at the bottom of that tier based on, I think, the way that they're competing. Injuries have been an issue. I mean, you can't ignore that. But I just think they're making big mistakes that you just can't make if you want to be a contender in a league with so much parity. So I think the conversation should be, show us who you are. I don't think they met the mark. I do think they have to be better. You can't change the pedigree of a program if you're PJ Fleck, and then people start to hold you to that standard, and everybody backs off and goes, well, wait a minute. Look at this and this and that. No, that's not what happens to good teams. Good teams are supposed to be able to play through it, and the Gophers got to find a way.
Yeah, because Tony Dungy always taught me, it's the next man up mentality. Glenn Mason would say it as well. When one guy goes down, the next man up. Ethan Kaliakmanis, I was hoping for a Tom Brady type of night where we remember the concussion from Drew Bledsoe. Tom Brady comes in, and that's all she wrote. Was hoping that was going to be Ethan Kaliakmanis, but it was not the night. 9 for 22, just at times looked good. At times just looked like a freshman, looked like the game was moving a little bit too fast for him. Looked like, there could have been some plays to help him out that maybe the coaches just didn't think of. And again, sometimes coaches outsmart themselves. Running the ball on 3rd and whatever, just to be patient, to say, you know what, let's not screw this up. Let's try to see if our defense can do it. And then eventually Penn State just start kicking the door down. When you look at a guy like Brevin Spanford, 6'7", 270 pounds, you look at the last two Super Bowl champions when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buccaneers as well, both use tight ends as their guy. You look at Rob Gronkowski. You also then look at Travis Kelce, teams that utilized the tight end heavily. And then all of a sudden they found success. You look at the success of the San Francisco 49ers previously when they used George Kittle. Those teams seem to always kind of have it together when they have a tight end. And the Gophers have that in Brevin Spanford. What do you think the hesitancy is, or the lack of usage with a guy with that size, that body type, to just make him your focal point of this offense and no longer a receiver?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think it starts with, can you get him the ball in the right spots? Like, do you have the talent at quarterback to help him shine? Because all those guys you named, it's a lot easier when Tom Brady's throwing the ball to you. It's a lot easier, when Jimmy Garoppolo is throwing the ball to you, if you're George Kittle, or Patrick Mahomes is getting the ball to you. I also think, like, tight end to me is a word from the 90s. Like, these guys aren't tight ends. They're gigantic athletic receivers, right? And I think if we see them that way, it's easier to think of them outside of this box that we tend to put tight ends in. These guys are just doing it all. So I think you got to use him if you're the Gophers. But again, can you get to him? And I think B, teams understand the threat that he is. They're not just going to make it easy for you. But I do think that's a target you have to utilize. And I think if you see him for the talent he is, if you see him as a receiver, which I think that's what these guys are, maybe they'll expand on what he can be.
And the Gophers' next opponent, I mean, this is an easy one in my opinion, but in the Big Ten, nobody's easy. Rutgers, who's actually getting a lot better as they're moving forward. But you look at Gophers, the Gophers playing Rutgers, and Tanner Morgan, who knows what's going to happen if it is truly a head injury, if he can clear the protocols, if they can get him back on the field, because we saw Tua Tagovailoa play, which a lot of people didn't think, and he looked fine. He played well. He actually took some hits and got up fine. So everybody's body heals differently. Everybody's head heals differently. Some guys retire. Some guys get back on the field. No signs of any injury in the past. But when you think about a kid like Ethan Kaliakmanis, and he's the future of this program, and Tanner Morgan, definitely going to need him for Wisconsin, going to need him for Iowa for sure. But is Rutgers a game to kind of maybe go with some kind of two quarterback system? Not to say if it gets out of hand, but if you're like, hey, it's 21-0, or we have a pretty good handle on this, to let Ethan get some true game time and not mop up time when, Rutgers is pretty much given up.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful with Ethan and his confidence, especially with a young quarterback. You can't tease him. So I think if you're PJ Fleck and you think there are sets, there are points in that game where you feel like, okay, hey, let's alternate, or maybe it's okay, we're gonna start this first series Tanner, second series Ethan, something like that. But I think you got to be careful about the confidence of a young quarterback who just came out of playing at Penn State, which, as you know, that's just a ridiculous environment for any quarterback to play in. Yes, this is an easier game, but he's still feeling that pressure. So right. I think if I'm PJ Fleck and Tanner Morgan's healthy and he's ready to go, I let him play. And barring disaster, I let Ethan sort of stay as the future, because he's got to kind of learn the ropes. But again, if that moment comes, I mean, we saw that with Clemson on Saturday with DJ Uiagalelei loses his spot in the game. Like, so if there's a moment like that, I get it, but I think you got to be careful with kind of sending a young quarterback to the wolves. I also think, Ron, like, I don't know if we can say any quarterback is the future anymore with the transfer portal. True. Because I think most coaches are out looking for that guy who can be a starter who's already a junior or senior. So, you don't know where Ethan ends up. But I do understand sort of patience with him, putting him in the right spot, building his confidence. But I would go with the vet if he's ready to go to try to get through. There's never an easy game in the Big Ten, but you got to win this one.
Yeah, and looking at the Gophers' next 5 games, they got 5 games left. You got Rutgers, you got Nebraska, you got Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin. PJ Fleck, it's in the past, 4-3. We know he puts that away. Now in this next 5-game season, What can the Gophers be in these next 5 games? When you look at, again, Rutgers, Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin, what does the future of the Gopher season look like?
They can be winners. I mean, there's no one that you listed that's unbeatable. I know Wisconsin has some more juice now that Jim Leonard's taken over as the interim head coach. They've looked better. Iowa can't score. You know, I mean, the offensive challenges that the Hawkeyes have had all season, we understand that. So, I mean, that's one of those games where it could come down to that one score, that one field goal. And I think the other 3 teams you mentioned, Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, all winnable games. All games I think you should win if you're Minnesota. Yeah. And what I got to give PJ Fleck credit for, and I think people miss this, is like this. I think his job was to change the pedigree of the program. And I think he's done it. I think when you change the pedigree of a program, the dudes just look different. Like all of a sudden, your third string looks a lot better. Your second string looks a lot better over time. So I think the Gophers have done that. I don't think this is a personnel challenge. I think it's an execution challenge, despite the injuries they have. They can get through this slate. I don't think there's a game that's a team that's insurmountable the rest of the way. And listen, you got your butt kicked at Penn State. I don't think you're going to see anything like that for the rest of the regular season. So they have an opportunity to finish strong. The challenge with teams like this, however, who start so high and get all the praise and the hype, and then they lose 3 in a row, who in that locker room is keeping these guys together? I don't know the answer to that. You know, like I don't know if they think they can be a good team again. But that's something for the coaching staff to figure out, the locker room to figure out, because the scary thing about the Rutgers game, as you know this, Ron, a lot of teams that were better than the Rutgers lost those games because they didn't have the right mentality. They've already lost the next 5 games in their mind, right? And I think the Gophers have to shake that more than anything. Put Penn State behind you. A lot of teams would have lost in that environment. But now you got a stretch that can help you salvage the season winning.
Yeah, I mean, the road to boat culture is about to get put to the test because this is what it's about. Forget what happened. Put your back to the target. Let's roll. Let's go. And let me help you guys grow. Patience. And that's what this program has been about. So we'll see. 5 games. We're looking forward to it. First up, Rutgers. Let's move on to the NFL. When you look at Kirk Cousins has changed his entire persona. He's putting on diamond chains now on the plane. He's still tucking his t-shirt into his sweatpants. I don't know why, but he's relaxed. He's having fun. Like I think in the past, honestly, if somebody would have said, "Hey, Kirk, put my chain on and make it spin like the rims do in Nelly's video," I don't think Kirk Cousins does it. Like I think he kind of is like, nah, man. Like I'm good. You guys have fun over there. Now Kirk is kind of, and maybe 5-1 changed him, but I truly believe he's just more relaxed now. He's taken on this leadership role. He's speaking to the team post game, passing out game balls to the owner and the coaches and the GM. Like that's just not the mentality he had under a seasoned coach who had been here, under a seasoned GM who had been here. And we know there was a lot of back and forth and tug of war over, I don't want Kirk. I want Kirk. I don't want Kirk. I want Kirk. And people always don't realize this. Kids can feel when parents are at odds. Like, even though they might not say it, they can tell when things aren't right around the house. And I think that's what was going on with the Vikings. Things weren't right in that house. And so now you look at this 5-1 Vikings coming off of a bye week, playing a Cardinals team who got better. They got Robbie Anderson. They also got DeAndre Hopkins back from suspension. Kyler Murray's telling his coach to chill the F out. So he clearly he's got his boy DeAndre back, so he's feeling a little bit more confident. DeAndre came out the gate, I think over 10 catches, 100 yards. But what can this Vikings team do now when you look at the Washington Commanders? Let's take 2 games, the Washington Commanders and the Arizona Cardinals, because we know those 2 after that, the Bills and the Cowboys, are going to be tough. But the Commanders and the Cardinals are the next up on the menu for the Vikings. What is this team going to do in those 2 games?
Yeah, I think first off, I don't give Kirk as much credit as maybe everybody else is in terms of his leadership this season. That's something that should have been there 4 years ago, So it's it's cool that he's doing those things, but it shouldn't take this point. It take a change in the coaching staff for him to be what every quarterback is paid to be in this league. But to your point, it does seem like his vibe is different. Maybe having a younger coach, it seems like they've got a staff that lets them have a little more fun. I don't think I've seen the Vikings have this much fun, maybe since the 2009 run. So maybe that's helping. when you're 5-1 and the Packers look like they couldn't beat the Wisconsin Badgers right now, that helps, right? Like, the division is yours if you want it. You better not lose to Detroit, and you better not lose to Justin Fields and all those dudes from LA Fitness they got playing offense for the Bears. So, like, to me, this is your division, man. This is your division. You're going to win the division. You're in the playoffs. Now it becomes, how far can you go? But to your point, this in the past is where the Vikings have struggled. It's all there. You have 5-1 in a division that's yours. The NFC looks like it's wide open. I think Philly's legit. I think Jalen Hurts is your MVP. I think that offense and defense is good. Who's great in the NFC after that? I don't think anybody is. There are a bunch of good teams. Nobody's great. So the potential is there for Minnesota. But I think Arizona is a dangerous game. DeAndre Hopkins came back and looked great in his first game. I don't know what's going on with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, but I do think Kyler Murray is feeling some of the, oh, you guys don't think I do my homework. People are doubting me. They think I'm overpaid. Suddenly, this might be the first time that Kyler Murray has been doubted. Remember, this guy was going to be the number one pick, in obviously NFL, baseball number one pick. This guy has been praised his whole career. And now he comes into this season, gets the big money, and people are going, maybe you're not worth it. That's a dangerous young quarterback you're about to face, who thinks he has to prove a point, who just got his receiver back, who just added another guy, Robbie Anderson, and a Cliff Kingsbury, who I think knows that this is the kind of game where you win, and all of a sudden the heat comes off. People back off of you in ways that maybe they haven't to this point. So I think that's a tough game. I think Washington's a tough game. Like, even though they've got all kinds of challenges, Carson Wentz on IR, Taylor Heineke now is in, they don't lay down for anybody. Like, that Washington Commanders team has just decided that no matter who they play, they're going to put up a fight. So those feel like trap games to me. I think the Vikings are more likely to play to their potential against Buffalo and Dallas than they are against Washington and Arizona. Because the tendency of this team has been, we'll play to whatever level you're at. And they gotta stomp on people at this point. Like, if you're going to be a Super Bowl contender, you got to separate yourself. And I think these upcoming games will show us a little bit more about who they are before they get to some of the big dogs in the NFL.
So when you look at big dogs in the NFL, it's nothing bigger than the quarterback. And I agree. So that's the one thing. I do agree that this team in the past has allowed themselves to play to that. So we'll see to the level of competition. So we'll see if the culture change is truly there. If Kirk Cousins is truly going to take hold of the NFC and the NFC North for sure, because you're right. Like, it's right there for the taking. But I got a tweet. So Shannon Sharp, my boy, came over the top of my head, cracked me over the head with a tweet. Now, this is from May 19, 2022. So I tweeted about Kirk Cousins. I don't think there's 10 quarterbacks better than Kirk Cousins. I personally don't. Shannon Sharp, of course, he's got to come over the top of the top rope, and everybody was on his joint. Like, I mean, this thing did like, what? I don't know. It was like 1 million something like comments and tweets and all this crap. But he said Brady, Burrow, Rodgers, Herbert, Mahomes, Stafford, Wilson, Russell, Watson, Deshaun, Allen, we know who that is in Buffalo, and then Kyler Murray. He's like, is that enough? Well, then I retweeted him back recently, of course, because, I love to save receipts. And I just said, hey, where you fall on this? Now, I know he's waiting because he's waiting. I know how he does because he did this last time to me. He's waiting for this next game because I think everybody is. Kyler Murray versus Kirk Cousins. Is the other shoe going to drop? Is Kirk Cousins going to fall off the cliff? And we're going to be like, man, here he goes again with these 3 interception games. Or is he going to actually put his foot on the throat of this NFL and say, hey, look, it's not just the diamond chains. It's in my head now. My heart is different. I've gotten rid of the Chihuahua. I'm now a pit bull. But in your opinion, I got some stats up there too. I mean, you got Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Matt Ryan. I'm going to throw him out of there. Josh Allen, Tom Brady. We can throw Geno Smith out. Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, then Aaron Rodgers. And then you got down there Kirk Cousins after Jalen Hurts. So in that, and I would throw Jalen Hurts in this now. I would for sure take Kyler Murray out. But do you agree that, and we don't have to go Kirk Cousins right away, but do you agree Justin Hurts now should be in this top 10 talk for the season? Sorry.
Jalen Hurts? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is real. I mean, thing I love about Jalen Hurts is, like, like, I don't know how many guys have been publicly demoted on a national stage the way that he was in the national championship game in Alabama when Tua replaced him. That's a tough dude, man, to take that and say all the right things after the game and celebrate with your teammates and then come back for a year and just sort of figure it out and kind of play behind Tua and know that everybody's moved on from you. Then he goes to Oklahoma, has an incredible year. People still are sort of like, yeah, but I don't know if he can play at the next level. He gets to Philly behind Carson Wentz. It's like, yeah, you know what? This is a good option to have if everything goes wrong. And he just continues to ignore the haters and get better and better. And the scary thing about Jalen Hurts, to me, is that now he's not just one of the top 10 quarterbacks, I think. He's one of the smartest quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts is throwing the ball away when he has to. He didn't do that last year. Jalen Hurts is making better decisions. Now, it helps when you add A.J. Brown to the mix and you have that run game. But, like, where do you stop that Philly offense? Okay, you're going to lock up their receivers? Well, they're going to run the ball down your throat. You're going to stop the run game? Good luck with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. You're going to bottle up all that? Well, now you got to deal with Jalen Hurts and all of the possibility attached to that dude. So I just think he's really good. I think he's your MVP. They better pay him a bunch of money while they can because I think he's earned it. But it always bothers me when a quarterback like that, especially a black quarterback, who just gets put in this running quarterback lane and put Jalen Hurts in the high IQ lane. He's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. If you watch the way that he plays and the way that he's running that team, it's just been remarkable. And I don't think we care enough about quarterback development. We sort of decide after 3 years who you are as a quarterback. And that's unfair to a lot of guys because some guys don't peak until year 4, 5, or 6. And I think Jalen Hurts is a guy on his way to just continuing to rise in this league. And when it's all said and done, I think he'll be a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Oh, okay. And then let's go with Kirk Cousins now. So I'm not even give the whole list with Kirk Cousins because Kyler Murray was the discussion. Would you take Kyler Murray or Kirk Cousins right now if you were going into this next game?
I take Kirk Cousins. I mean, just because Kyler, first off, if you go nose to nose with your head coach on national TV, you can't tell me everything's okay, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. When he said chill the, whatever out to Cliff Kingsbury, I heard Cliff Kingsbury after the game was kind of like, it's no big deal. Listen, man, you're going to lose your job if y'all don't get that right. So I think it is a big deal. I would take Kirk. I don't know if I'd take Kirk in the playoffs because to me, playmakers win championships. Like, I think quarterbacks who just sort of do everything right and kind of get you through the regular season don't always show up in the postseason. And that's still the big question for Kirk Cousins. Regular season Kirk is great. We see that. We know his capabilities. But, like, can you be that guy in the postseason? So right now, going into this week, I think the Cardinals have a lot to figure out. I would pick Kirk Cousins. But I don't know if that'll be true at the end of the season just because of the kind of quarterback I think you need to advance in the playoffs.
And Kirk Cousins has won some playoff games against the Saints, so we will see what he does because most likely, barring a meltdown, they are going to the playoffs. We do have the Daily 3 coming up. Sam's going to join the show, Sam Extra, my producer, myself, and Myron. And remember, Tony Dungy had one of the best defenses in Tampa but couldn't get over the hump. And then all of a sudden, John Gruden comes in, gets Brad Johnson together, gets that offense going, and they win a Super Bowl. Not saying the Super Bowl is this year, but I'm not saying it's not. You never know what a coach in the quarterback's ear can do for a team, that offense, and their confidence. But check out our Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast on YouTube following every Twins, Vikings, Wild, or Wolves game. Our Locked On team hosts are broadcasting live with team insiders. Never miss a podcast by subscribing to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. Well, it's that time, Sam. Take it away.
And before we get to that, make sure you check out NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games on the NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football, and betting advice from the field's leading experts, Bet Online. So follow NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of NFL, Vikings bye week, of course, I'd like both of your input. What was the number one thing you saw in the NFL yesterday? Ron, we'll start with you.
Well, the number one thing I saw was a Washington Commanders team ran by Taylor Heineke that found a way to get it done. And Taylor Heineke, being from Wisconsin, grew up watching the Packers. He was excited. He started off slow, and then they climbed their way back and won that game. So this Taylor Heineke revenge tour, it's a real thing. And he's coming to Minneapolis because Carson Wentz is out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. And so he is coming to Minneapolis. Last time he was here, he kicked the glass in. Now he's trying to come kick the door down. But just watching the Packers struggle, I actually felt bad, like seeing Aaron Rodgers on the field like a little kid throwing a tantrum that doesn't want to go because he doesn't want to put his shoes on and go to the store. Like, I felt a little bad because that's a guy that really misses Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams with the Raiders is not doing great. So that's a story that I think we're going to tell for years from now. They should have just taken less money and stayed together, and they would have been just fine. And now they're learning their lesson, just like a lot of other quarterbacks and receivers tend to do. It worked out for Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. It's worked out for the Minnesota Vikings with Justin Jefferson. It doesn't always happen that way. So that's what caught my eye, was just Aaron Rodgers. Like, he looked confused. He looked like without the defense, that game is not even close. Devondre Campbell got his first, pick six. Shout out to Minnesota's Devondre Campbell. But that's what caught my eye.
Myron?
Yeah, I was going to say the Packers too. I mean, so listen, I think Aaron Rodgers has a relationship problem in that locker room. And like, here's the deal, man. I'm about Aaron's age, and I've got, kids, and like that generation, if you don't have a bond, they're going to tune you out. And Aaron Rodgers didn't work on that relationship with that locker room. Like, as soon as it became clear that Devontae Adams is leaving, he wasn't there in the preseason. There was talk about him wanting to be traded. It's been kind of 2 years of Aaron Rodgers toying with this idea of him not being in Green Bay. And I think there's a disconnect happening with him and those guys. Like, I don't think they're following Aaron the way that past Packers teams have followed Aaron. And I think that's affecting kind of what they are. Like, at some point, you got to drop all that when you're struggling the way that they're struggling and just be a regular dude and admit that, yeah, man, this is on me too. Like, I'm a part of this. You don't go to the podium and say things like you said last week of, hey, if we have a personnel problem, that's another conversation. And I don't know, yesterday he said, we'll be okay, but do your guys believe that? I don't know. But I think the Packers are in a real challenge, and I don't know what the future holds, because when you do this as a franchise, somebody has to decide what's next.
Yeah, the deterioration of those veteran quarterbacks, Brady, Wilson, Rodgers, seems like we're experiencing the end of an era to some extent. Second question for you guys, pivoting to baseball. I want your ranking 1 through 10. The World Series is set. Phillies and Astros on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you care about that matchup? Ron, we'll start with you.
Can I go -7? So there's I'll go with like a warm 4. Like, it's that bath water that, has been running all day and it's sitting there, and your mom told you to take a bath and you just waited. Like, eventually you're going to do it because you have to do it. So I'm going to watch just because it's going to be on when I'm working or something, or I'm up doing something, I'll watch a little bit. Justin Verlander, definitely, as a former Detroit Tiger, love him. Bryce Harper, love his energy, love his bats at the plate. I just don't know. I mean, I do want to see how many times people bring up the fact that they cheated one year and now they're back. Is it they found a new way to cheat without getting caught? So I'm a little bit intrigued on that, just to see like where people fall in line on that. Like, if they win again, can people then say, okay, you know what? Even if they didn't cheat, they still were good? Or, hey, these guys are still cheating and we just cannot figure out what they're using now, whether it's they put the buzzer, somewhere where you can't see it if we celebrate. Who knows? Like, stealing signs and all that kind of crap, and somebody's videotaping. And Like, we will see. We shall see what this is. But no, I don't know if I'm super excited. I don't know if there would be two baseball teams that would get me super excited besides the Twins, just because this town would be excited. But it's postseason baseball. It's always fun to watch the beginning of it. But baseball, in my opinion, they have a time issue. There's way too much time in between pitches. There's way too much BS going on between these umpires and some of the calls they get wrong and then the discussion. So until that speeds up, like softball, like I love watching college softball. It's fast paced. Baseball, on the other hand, I need the big moments.
Yeah, I'm a 3 with the potential to go higher. Depending on how the series goes, I'll put it on one of the TVs, and kind of see if there's anything intriguing. Like if this were a concert that I paid a bunch of money to go to, I would want Phillies and Astros to be the opening act. Like, I don't want it to be the main show, right? And I think that's kind of the challenge. So we'll see. I don't think you have what baseball needed, which to me was either Yankees Mets or Yankees Dodgers. That didn't happen. Baseball people will care, I think, a lot. But I think most of us probably tune in once you start getting to a point where one team has won 3 games, honestly. That's when I think a lot of people will buy into that. Before that, it's going to be more difficult, I think, because you don't have some of the marquee names. And to Ron's point, the Astros, that cloud is never going to go away. In the sense that they cheated their way to a championship, a lot of people are always going to have that feeling. And then Philly, like, man, if Philly wins this, like, I know a bunch of Philadelphia fans, they're never going to let us hear the end of it. They're just relentless. We can't let them have the Phillies and then maybe the Eagles too in a championship. It's just going to be too much Philly if Philly wins this.
Yeah, they've already started greasing the poles in Philly, I saw. So they're prepared for some mayhem.
Definitely.
Philly's just a reminder, too, like how badly the Twins blew it, because Philly just snuck into the tournament, 87 wins, pretty middle-of-the-road season, and here they are. The Twins could have been there. They could have done that. And that Philly team,
they don't have a Bryce Harper in a pitcher.
They do not. No, the Twins way too injured. All right, last one. You guys both are basketball guys. What do you make of Ben Johnson with the Gophers signing a 5-star recruit, Dennis Evans, a 7-footer, one of the biggest Gophers basketball recruits in a couple of decades? We'll start with Ron.
Yeah, this kid's one of the top 20, I think, players in the country. When you look at 7 feet tall, you got a 7-footer in college. Now, there's one or two things can happen. You can have a Greg Odom type of effect or a Jahlil Okafor, which doesn't mean they're going to be great pros. That means they're going to dominate college. When you look at DeAndre Ayton, I don't think he would be as good in the NBA if it wasn't for Devin Booker and Chris Paul. I think he's getting a little bit ahead of himself, thinking he's this great, thing, and he has one of the best shooters in the NBA, if not the best shooter or scorer in the NBA, in Devin Booker. So when I look at a 7-footer in college, you don't run into a lot. Look at Purdue. They found lightning in a bottle with their 2 bigs. I mean, yes, they had Jaden Ivey taking over games, but in the college playoff or Big Ten tournament and then the college tournament, they didn't use Jaden Ivey the way they did. And so I look at Dawson Garcia and this kid, not this year, but next year. If Dawson Garcia does stick around, which I think he should, I don't see him all of a sudden becoming a lottery pick. That's going to be a really good roster. And what that does, that adds to the ability to now recruit more guys. You got Taylon Cooper, kid from Michigan. So we know Detroit kids. I mean, never forget about the Flint kids from Michigan State. Like, Detroit kids, Michigan kids know how to ball. And so I'm excited to see this kid at point guard too, because he's a facilitator. And so now when you can add this in about a year or two, Ben Johnson is putting together a really good roster. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a big get for Ben. And it's one of those things, again, you got to change the pedigree of the program. You got to change the kinds of players you're bringing into your locker room. And I think he's doing that with Dennis. If you can protect the rim, that's just such an important thing in college basketball. Now, there aren't a lot of people playing through 7-footers, because everybody's trying to be like the NBA. So, your 7-footers, even at this level, want to shoot threes. And Dennis is certainly more of a traditional guy, wants to block shots, working on his offensive game. But I think he can be really good at helping them defensively, being a guy who develops over time offensively. I talked to some folks within some sources close to the TCU program, I'll say, who that was the other school that was going after Dennis. And I can tell you they are heartbroken after losing out on Dennis to Minnesota because they really, really liked him. TCU thought they had him locked up, and they were actually kind of surprised when Ben Johnson found a way to get him up to Minnesota. But from the people who wanted him and thought they had him, it certainly sounds like Minnesota is getting a young player with star potential once he arrives. But I think Dennis is a great addition, and I think he'll have an impact right away.
Yeah, the last big 7-footer the Gophers had, Daniel Aturu, he lasted 2 years before he went pro. I think the Gophers would be happy if they get 2 years of Dennis Evans.
Yeah, I don't know if, I mean, again, kids jump into the NBA sometimes too soon. I get the G League and all this stuff now is getting kids paid, but there's nothing wrong with developing it and going at your own pace. I mean, it worked out for Juwan Howard. He ended up playing in the NBA for a long time. Didn't do a lot, but he played in the NBA for a long time. So never overlook, being able to develop in college, unless you're this kid, Victor, whatever, Wambeawa, whatever, how you say it.
That dude's special. I saw him a couple weeks ago live. That dude's about to change the whole NBA. Yeah, there's nobody like him.
7'4", shooting threes. Well, that'll do it for our threes. That's Myron Medcalf and Ron Johnson. That's Sam Ekstrom. We want to thank Matt DeBritz on the keys behind the screens. And remember, when you subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota, you're getting endless Vikings talk with local experts. Subscribe to the free Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast feed. Wherever you find your podcast, you can find our videos on Locked On Sports Minnesota's YouTube channel. You can also find us on the Amazon or the Roku apps. Just download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. You can get all the videos, all the podcasts, all the interviews. You want to go see what Adam Thielen looks like in person? Go check it out, just in case you can't get to a Vikings game, because we had him on with Cam Bynum as well. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Have a great day.